Hello, welcome back. The year is 2001. So we had one boat this year. We got the Hurricane 2. So we got rid of the Donnie 6 and the Hurricane. And I don't think any of us were very sad to see the Hurricane go, although the Donnie 6 was a fantastic boat. We were sad to see that boat go. That went up, eventually became the Starfish out of New Hampshire. So we would see it out there occasionally. But we just had the Hurricane 2, and it was a great whale watch boat. It's one of my favorites. So we started out the season, we actually had a mother calf right whale pair, and I don't have any pictures of it. It was kind of off in the distance. We didn't really get close to it, but we kind of started the season out with a lot of fin whales. And I was talking to my interns from 2001 a couple days ago, and one of them talked about how she gained such an appreciation for fin whales because we got to spend so much time with them. So they're absolutely gorgeous animals. This is actually Ladder, who was one of our favorite fin whales, easily recognizable by the propeller scars on its back. Unfortunately, a lot of fin whales have these scars. I actually remember one day whale watching in the late 90s. We must have seen 5 or 6 different fin whales that had propeller scars on their bodies. It was crazy. But we spent a lot of time in the beginning of the season with the fin whales, and then kind of the end of June, the humpbacks started showing up, and we had Mural and calf. Mural is one of my favorite tails. I just think it is such a cool fluke. And our usual regulars, Salt and Spoon. We had I was looking at my notes. We had Tornado and Thread that fluked at the same time, and I didn't get a picture of it. I was bummed. But the thing that's really cool about that is that they are brother and sister. And, we always wonder if the siblings recognize each other. So rarely do we ever see adults with their moms out there. And I think probably even more rarely do we see siblings that we know of as siblings actually from their mom's side. We don't know if they recognize each other or not. We assume they probably do. So this was the year of the BE buoy, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure this is the year that we spent most of our time down there. The end of June, we also did our annual fundraiser, and that's when Dr. Roger Payne would come on the boat and narrate the trips for us. And it was always such a really cool night. So here's a picture of all the interns that year with Roger. But I do remember this night we had Nile. Well, first of all, there were whales everywhere, and they were breaching, and Nile did this beautiful breach kind of right at sunset. We saw Cajun a lot. She's definitely at this point becoming a favorite because she would play with the boat a lot. We also had this one day where she just breached over and over and over again, and the breaches were so close to the boat. This is a picture of her eyeball, and then this was this great picture that Jude got of Cajun laying on her side. And some of the other whales that we had Pinch, we had Wizard, we had Rocker, Anchor. This is Midnight, and this was really cool. I remember one of my interns had adopted Midnight as a kid, and it was like her second to the last trip that summer, and we went out and we saw Midnight. There were lots of whales. I think we were actually on the southwest corner at that point. Lots of whales feeding everywhere, and Midnight was among them. So that was really cool that she got to see Midnight before she left. We had done the tall ships last summer, but then the Libertad came through, and it was such a, it's so cool anytime, especially we see a ship randomly out there. This was the Libertad. So then we also had this whale named Tierra, and Tierra had been entangled sometime in the early 90s. I remember in the mid 90s, there used to be this video of the whales off the coast that was on the public cable channel, maybe in Gloucester at that time, but Tierra had rope around his tailstock. It went down on a dive, and a normal fluke. And I think I remember that in like 94, 95, seeing that video over and over and over. But we had Tierra quite a few times this summer, and this is what his tail looks like now. So in this picture, he's swimming normally under the boat. His tail, instead of being like this, is kind of rotated. So I don't know if he still has line wrapped around his tail. You can see where it's raw on the sides there. And then in this picture, this is him going down for a dive. So on the left-hand picture is the top side of the fluke, and the right picture is the underside of the fluke. So his tail was really, really pretty mangled. We had buckshot and a calf that year. And so this was a picture of buckshot feeding. So we did have quite a bit of surface feeding that summer. And then this is buckshot's calf doing some playing. We had Timberline and Epee. Touchdown. Touchdown is Cajun's sibling. And Touchdown is also Sparta's aunt. So this was, or aunt. This was a very cool sighting for me. So Sparta was one of the first calves that I had met. So the first year I was a naturalist, she was one of the calves. And she came back with her first calf that summer. So she was only 5 years old, which is the youngest that we've seen animals come back with calves. The calf was named Hedgehog, and they were both really little. And I actually had in my notes that I had said, oh my gosh, it's so cute, it's really little. And my friend Brian, who's much more of a scientist than I am, said it was scientifically interesting. You might hear more about that in 2002 as well, my perception of things versus the scientist perceptions of things. This is a calf, or not the calf, this was Sparta breaching too, but it was so cool to see them both that summer together. But sadly, that was the last year that we saw Sparta. And so I don't know if they were both, if having a calf at such a young age took so much out of her that she didn't survive. Maybe something else happened, but I don't think Hedgehog was seen later, and I don't think Sparta was seen after that. So that was a very cool sighting for me because I remember it and I will always remember it, but also very sad because we never saw her again after that summer. And then this is Beacon and Titan, who was one of Bodine's favorite whales from that fall. I remember we had lots and lots of breaching. So one of my dearest friends today came out for the first time that summer. She called me and asked to come and be an intern. So I said, sure, come stay with me for a couple of weeks. But she was out for like 2 or 3 weeks, and we saw breaching on almost every single trip that summer. And so when people ask me about breaching, I reference that and I'll say some years it's amazing. We see it over and over and over again. And then other years that you'll hear about pretty soon, we hardly see any of it. So lots and lots of breaches that summer. And then in the fall, it kind of started this series of years where in the fall, the whales started doing this really different feeding strategy. And they were feeding on either krill or amphipods. A lot of times we couldn't see it. But they weren't blowing bubbles. They would just do these really big lunges and come up at the surface with their mouths open. Occasionally we would see bubbles popping up afterwards, but these are some incredible pictures that Rita got one day when they were feeding really close to the boat. It was just such an amazing sight. So the other thing that I haven't mentioned, we started using teaching tools on the boat in 1999. So that was when we first made that model of Stellwagen Bank that I've shown a couple times. But we also did plankton tows. And so this is Matt and Evan doing plankton tow one trip. And I used to use puppets when I did my dock talk. So this is all the puppets. And we get on the deck and play games with the kids on the way back in and dump out a bucket of toys. And then we also, that summer, we made a model of Jeffrey's Ledge, which ended up being so big that we didn't really carry around that often. But we made it because we had spent so much time early in the season up on Jeffrey's. And so using the model of Stellwagen made it a little bit tricky. But we had such a fun group of interns that year. It was very cool. And until that year, the interns would all live with me. I had an apartment and I had them stay upstairs. But that summer I decided to get these 2 cottages that were kind of over in Rockport, and they were behind someone's house, and small would be the operative word to describe them. But the interns were super about it, and they hung in there all summer long up in those cottages. Occasionally we'd even get gussied up and go out for the night that year. 2001, the Marine Mammal Conference was in Vancouver, and they're usually in November or December of that year. So that year I went with Brian and Sarah. So Brian is my scientist friend. And Sarah was one of the other naturalists that was on the boat that year. And we had so much fun. The conference lasted about 5 or 6 days. And it was the first time, I think, when I go back, I think it's the first time that I met my friend Jen, who works or heads Blue Ocean Society. And we've collaborated on so many projects over the years, but we take it back to that conference. We had this kind of gathering of educators on whale watch boats. And it's really the first time that we started having a conversation and got involved then in, how do we really make a difference here, especially in this venue at these conferences. So that was one of the really neat things that I remember about that year, especially being at the conference. But we also traveled for 5 or 6 days afterwards, and it was so much fun. We went up to Vancouver Island and to Telegraph Cove, and we went over this pass and it was snowing. It was crazy because it didn't really feel like winter yet. But I love this picture of the three of us. I forgot about it, sitting in the skull of this whale. I mean, it's hard to imagine how huge these animals are when you see a picture like this, you know? And just a couple other pictures. We stopped at Limekiln Lighthouse and Friday Harbor. Brian looking out for orcas there. We didn't see any, which was a bummer, but we saw loads and loads of bald eagles all over the place. So it's just a really, really fun trip after the conference. So we had a great summer that year, not just with the whales who were still plentiful, but the people that were there working on the boat as well. It was a really fun year. So hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you back next year for 2002.